Our guest host this hour joins us. Manwa Magoma is a public affairs and crisis communications expert and founder of Magoma and Bain. Baine.
Thank you.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation in the Situation Room with us to,
I'm happy to be here as a host today, and I hope I'll be here many more times.
It depends on what you say today.
Nothing controversial.
No.
Nothing slanderous.
Not what you say, how you say it.
That's what matters the most.
Well, yes, it does. But that you'd come back again and that you're willing to come back, we'll ensure we make that happen.
That's a really good footing, I must say.
Yes.
Also joining us in the hot seat this morning, Nelson, you're no guest to this conversation, but we're happy to have you every time. Nelson HAVI is lawyer and MP candidate, Westlands constituency. Karibu sana.
Asante. Happy to be here again.
Thank you to be here. So, many things happened between Thursday night and Monday morning. As is the case, they say, one day in politics is like 1,000 years to the rest of the civilians. We saw many things take place, and I think the question is that we're trying to break down nuance. We're trying to find out exactly what is going on, but there seems to be a standoff between the IEBC and the DCI today about who was carrying what, who should have been allowed, who didn't do due diligence when certain things happened in the manner in which they did. Right now, we seem to be caught in the eye of the storm. And then many questions in terms of credible elections, many questions in terms of process and due process at that, then now are staring us in the face. So what do we know? We know that a bunch of individuals came into the country with election material. That we know. We know that the DCI also started an investigation after they were alerted of this fact Thursday evening. We also know that the IEBC has rebutted this, said, look, this is all right because these are fellas who are carrying this material as we have asked them to do, and they're carrying out their duties. DCI says, well and good. However, the kind of material that we have seen being carried should have been, number one, marked. Number two, they should have identified themselves prior to customs actually asking them the questions that they did. And number three, to have been carrying such sensitive material prior to travel, there should have been notice that this was going to happen. It did not. So the questions that we're asking this morning is that what does this portend for the process? What is DCI allowed or not allowed to ask? And are we just looking at a political situation, or are we really looking at a case where we will see a flawed election?
That was just the icing on the cake. Yeah? If you look at the main print papers, if you look at the Star, they have a headline, Ruto office raided as DP state tussle over rigging claim. If you go to the Standard, they have a similar story. If you look at the Nation, so it didn't just begin and end with the issue that you are raising. The narrative has now shifted ever so slightly to, again, issues of servers in certain offices, and the mention of the Deputy President's name has also come into the discussion. So if you're asking the question of what it portends, I personally am a bit puzzled because there's a lot of information. Some of it doesn't necessarily add up. There is a story of gentlemen who apparently come from Venezuela. Is it because they have Venezuelan passports? They represent a certain company. A company that deals in technology.
Yeah.
The argument is that, is it 3 or 4 examples of countries where they have plied their services and there have been issues, but they have done this in 30 other countries. Why don't we hear about the others? We only hear about these 4. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of this show, it's technology. It fails sometimes.
You can't just say casually that it fails sometimes. It failing sometimes is 40 billion Kenya shillings. It failing sometimes election postponed for 90 days. It failing sometimes is just putting this country in tenterhooks. So there's no space for it.
Actually, no. Allow me to disagree with you. This is technology.
Absolutely.
It hangs. It has issues. I am saying there is technology. There's a company that started off as a company that worked on technology for banks, sensitive enough. They got into the election business. They have done this in 30 countries. We have mentioned 4. Surely, if it was 15 countries, we'd say, no, these guys don't seem to know what they're doing. In one of those cases, they themselves are the ones who came out and said, you know something, there were some million votes here that were added. They came out and said it. So, even as the issues are being raised, I'm asking the question, what exactly is being raised? What is the issue here?
What exactly is happening, Nelson, as somebody who has dealt? I mean, clearly we're looking at electoral processes here. We're also looking at the law, and we're also looking at, custodians of the law, one of those being the police in form of the DCI today. From a bird's eye view, and even maybe an even more articulate view, what is going on and who really has the right to ask what?
Now, as I've said, and I believe I've often said it on this platform, the conduct of an election is not just a political exercise, it's a legal process. I propose to handle this contest from that legal perspective. A free and fair election requires that independent institutions be given the opportunity to do their work as mandated by the Constitution. What we are seeing now is a deliberate, determined assault by certain individuals in the executive to use certain organs of government to interfere with the functions of the IEBC. To me, that is very clear because we have a case where the IEBC has indicated that these individuals whom you suspect to have committed certain offenses, who you claim have not made certain declarations, indeed work for us. Now, who will be better placed to understand what those individuals do than IBC itself? Who is the complainant in the claim that is being investigated by the DCI? And even as we pursue this discussion, let us look at what the DCI has been doing lately. I mean, it's one of the institutions whose credibility levels, whose ratings on integrity is very low in this country. Now, it is on that premise that we must understand that the DCI, and in particular its director, George Kinoti, do not mean well. They do not have the intention, they do not have the interest of the people of Kenya insofar as this election is concerned. And it must worry, it must concern. Yes.
Can we go to that? Because, unfortunately, I feel as though we hear statements like this, Nelson, like what you're saying,
Yes,
without receiving a very simple answer for something that we see play out. There are certain things that happened, which in my opinion, should not have happened in the manner in which we saw them play out at the airport. How is it that an individual then is carrying election materials for a process which already is extremely delicate, as you've said? Why should an individual be carrying that? And a very simple answer which was sought till date, if you ask me, has not been given. But then here we are then, and we are playing it down to, again,
The DCI
state capture,
is
and we're playing it
with
down to the
an
interference of
independent-
DCI with an independent process. Meanwhile, the very simple question that has been asked has not been answered.
Let me remind Nelson, IEBC itself has set a precedence that every time election materials come to the country, they need to alert the authority that material XYZ is coming into the country because it's the police to protect that material. You've got a case where the material flies in with a gentleman and nobody's informed. If you may recall, I think there was an issue when the first batch of ballot papers were coming to the country, or there was a rumored issue that even the commissioners themselves did not quite know what batch was coming or what had arrived at the airport and so on and so forth. So when you look at those things, and then HAVI here now starts throwing stones at the DCI. DCI are just doing their job. Their job is to check everything that comes into the country. Now, if they find something bad, HAVI, what do? They let it pass? And then tomorrow you blame the same DCI for having let people walk in with material that was used to rig an election?
When you have a situation where you have two supposedly independent institutions who unfortunately both do not have a very squeaky clean past. They don't. When issues arise from both these institutions, you tend to suspend judgment on the issue until you know more. Because IEBC has had opportunities to respond to certain things very clearly.
And they have not.
And they have not.
They've failed
and you wonder,
miserably.
why are they just responding?
Simple answer.
Yes. And then when they respond sometimes, I am now referring to a discussion that a panel of journalists had with the chairman and the CEO. The question which was posed was, did you, when you did your background check on this organization, know about some of these issues we've raised about the failure of this system? The CEO says he didn't know. Now, you know that one? You pause and take a deep breath and say, he didn't know. Okay, all right. So what else don't you know?
And yet every time I'm sure he goes to buy things online, I'm sure that he
You
checks
know,
products
friends,
online.
we sit on a pedestal that obliges us to inform the public, information towards solutions. Now, there are two issues here. How did the DCI come to know of these individuals, what they were bringing into the country, if they had not been informed? That is one. Number two, what is the solution to this perceived problem? You understand? Why does it arise at this particular point in time? Look, it must be emphasized that the oversight, the conduct of an election is the function of the IEBC.
It is.
Absolutely.
The DCI is mandated with preventing the commission of offences and tackling offences that have been committed. You understand?
Across board, which also includes elections.
Exactly.
Yes.
With that premise in mind, then we ask ourselves, what is it that we are discussing? Is it just something that is interesting to discuss, or is it a matter of public interest? That dichotomy must come out clear, because there's heightened tension, you understand, created by someone. And it is my considered opinion, it's somebody who wants to tinker with election.
If that was
and
the
if you
case,
look at
Nelson,
it more objectively, friends here, you realize that the DCI is investigating nothing. The same way they have been investigating nothing in many issues.
How do we know? How do we know that? Because how do you arrive at that, Nelson? Because this is the question. And if we looked at the details that came out, especially Friday morning, and we asked the question, who are these individuals and what relation do they have to the IEBC? That was number one. Number two, why is it that they were carrying this material in their luggage, unmarked, unnotified? This is the thing here, because Nelson, that is exactly what you've said is exactly what it is going to do. That it is going to raise public suspicion. That it is going to raise you're going to have a heightened situation of fear and anxiety. That if this is happening, that somebody could just stroll by, say for the camera, that somebody took notice of and said, hold on a minute, what are these things? Had that not happened, we would not be having this conversation here. And so what it does is that it makes you to ask, what else could be happening in relation to this election that nobody knows about today?
I have to ask,
very
Nelson,
appropriate, yes.
Nelson, you said we need to, and you are right in so doing, we need to ask ourselves what it is we're discussing. And I'm going to ask you what you think we are discussing. And you asked the question, why now? When else could it have happened? It couldn't have happened last year. What I'm trying to say, Nelson, is the points you raise are valid. But the reason why the questions keep coming up is because there are so many unanswered questions. You have flown out of the country. When you put your luggage through that X-ray machine, it picks up things. If I believe the story that came out, that's what happened.
Actually, just to help Nelson, when you put papers through the scanner, they always show as a block, because the rays can't be able to penetrate right through the paper. So when you've got a lot of them in a suitcase, it will automatically pick up those papers. And I suspect that's how this gentleman was found. It's not that somebody needed to notify anybody.
Let's not dwell on the trivialities. I've traveled all over the world. Just a minute, Elder. At one point in time at Ben Gurion, an officer said, can we have a look at your shoes? Because it looks like it has some radioactive material. So they put it on the scanner. Right. Then after 5 minutes, they established it was just sand. Look, how long does it take the DCI to indicate to the people of Kenya what offense has been committed? You understand? Listen, I don't speak from the emptiness of my head. I'm interrogating facts, and I marry them with the law. And the earlier we progress in this journey, the better place we are to reach the destination and give a proper insight, illuminate the issues to the people of Kenya. Where is the offense? Who is the complainant? What do they want to do about it? We have seen the DCI undertake some of these exciting missions before. They arrest people, he goes on social media, sometimes he comes with the mainstream media here, and then after a few days, they take those people to court, they withdraw the charges, they're not able to progress. We don't want to waste more time. We have a few days to the election. Tell us what is wrong. Tell us what you want done speedily so that we progress.
But
we pay you a lot of money, you the DCI.
Said they've concluded the investigation?
You're investigating paper?
Have they said?
Stickers? Marks?
Have they said they have concluded the investigation?
Nelson, I think this is the problem. That the triviality that you're talking about, I think, then is being played out there.
Yes.
That it's not just paper; it's election material for an election that takes place in 2 weeks.
Exactly.
That is the problem.
The more reason as to why, if the DCI is genuine in what they're doing, they ought to have given us a report by now. You understand? You cannot allow this to prevail longer than necessary.
Okay. Let me go along
and Elder, before you proceed, I'm not holding brief for the IBC. I'm not holding brief for the Venezuelans.
No one has suggested that.
I'm holding brief for the people of Kenya, the rule of law and constitutionalism, the need for independent institutions to be permitted to do the work as given by the Constitution.
Let's go with the argument. If that is the yardstick, then why don't we have the same yardstick for IBC? If indeed there is something that requires explanation, let DCI step aside, let IBC explain to us.
Very true.
And unfortunately, we've not heard that, Magoma.
And Nelson, if you're holding brief for the people of Kenya, the people of Kenya would like to know at this moment in time, are they going to have a free and fair election? I think that's the assurance that everybody is looking for.
Indeed.
Beyond everything else. That's the assurance that every human being in this country is looking for, that will the elections be free, fair, and will my vote count? But if you say that let independent institutions do their work, the police are also independent. They are just trying to do their job.
Okay.
They stopped a gentleman from coming into the country with material that they believe when on checking was election material.
How long do they need to do a simple job?
But they
I actually don't know. I can't even begin to try and tell you how long they need. I mean, I would ask the same question.
Dr. Matiang'i once said, and I say this with a lot of restriction. He said, we have a big problem, especially at the higher level of the police, because most of them are illiterate. I think the problem with that office, the problem with that office is being headed by an illiterate cop.
That's unfair. That's unfair to say.
It's not only unfair; it's not true. He knows it.
Have you ever seen him? Have you ever heard him speak any coherent English paragraph?
Yes, I have.
English is not a yardstick.
Or even Swahili. Have you ever seen him
properly?
Look, Nelson, you speak well.
Touch the wrong nerve.
Yes, you have. You have an excellent brain. You are an excellent debater, and you know how to premise a discussion. We are also not holding brief for the police service.
Okay, that's good enough.
All we are asking is, this yardstick you speak of, it seems to be only level when it's with reference to the IEBC, and then when it comes to the police, it isn't. Yeah. These people, if I may use your term, illiterate or not, by the way, they are not illiterate. They are well informed and they're also well trained. They know what they're doing. If you want to bring in a discussion of the deliberateness of what they are doing with regards to even the news about the DC, one of the DP's offices being raided, you see, that's a completely different discussion. If we're talking about bodies being found in Rivayala, that's a completely different discussion. We are discussing the matter of these election materials that were found at the airport by two individuals who are not Kenyans who are coming into the country. That's really it. And the people who are best placed to explain this to us in a manner that we would understand by the IBC. And they've been toing and froing on these issues and leaving us more confused than when we first started.
In fact, let me just bring it into context. Yes,
no, you're taking it out of context. Elder, the point is this. These people, whoever they are, these individuals who are in charge of the DCI are wailing more than the bereaved. The bereaved here, if any, is supposed to be the IBC. The IBC has told you there is no problem. These people are here with our permission. There is no problem.
Nelson.
There's no problem. The material they have is intended for this purpose. But
you are trivializing this issue.
This is the problem, Nelson. And yes. Magoma had something to say. I'm going to give a minute. The issue is the IBC, which already set precedent on the operations of bringing in material into this country, has gone against the very thing that they said, saying that material coming into this country for the purposes of an election must either be pre-notified or they must be labeled. And those things did not happen. So the question is, why? And then we're asking the question, who now here is telling the truth? Who is telling the truth? Because the bereaved maybe do not have an opportunity to shout out about what's going on because they do not know. Magoma.
You know, the person who's made this situation worse is Chebukati himself. If you read the statement that he made right after, I think the police spokesperson issued a one-page on the matter in the very original time. He went on accusing DCI of all sorts and manners of things and quoting stations that don't exist. And I think it's from that point that then DCI decides and says, okay, then let's lay everything bare for the public to be able to see. Because at that point, it was actually not a big issue.
And one of the ways to lay it bare is by IEBC telling us exactly what's going on.
Exactly. And you know, IEBC many times has failed to come true or to be honest with Kenyans. Many times. There's so many things that they've done that are not right. And I'm surprised, Nelson, you're saying that let's just leave them because they're an independent institution. They are independent, but they're accountable to Kenyans. They are accountable. And we can't allow them to do things in a wrong way and then come and ask them later after August 9th.
Okay. Well, leadership entitles those who are in those seats to provide solutions. I'm here to provide solutions from a legal perspective based upon the facts that are there. And I must emphasize, I'm not defending IBC. I'm just saying this. Let IBC do its work. And part of IBC's work is to speak for itself. Look at the track record of the DCI. You understand? They'll dramatize anything. See, the other day they had a tussle with the office of the ODPP. They said they want to take charge of prosecution. But you see, it is not the individuals in the office of the DCI who are behind this thing. That office is the most permeated office, is the least independent office in this country. No wonder, therefore, we've said we need to get to this election pretty fast, have a new government where the office of the Inspector General of Police, the office of the DCI, will be independent to perform its duties without this puppeteering that you're seeing. This is puppeteering. It's absolute puppeteering.
Nelson, you can't dismiss it as puppeteering.
Okay, I think all right, let's take a break on that because then we'll give Magoma a minute to breathe because the thing here is
Magoma, you need to breathe. Do it right.
Triviality is here. We cannot downplay some of the things that are going on here. We'll give you a minute to come back and continue with that point.
This is the Situation Room. The only way to start your day.
Our guest host today is Manuel Magoma, and our guest in the studio is Nelson HAVI. Having this conversation about what seems to be a standoff between the IEBC and the DCI, and just, reiterating that there are questions that are being asked, and unfortunately, I mean, being very clear on this, that there are answers that are not being given. Before we went to the break, Magoma,
to be honest, and let's just now look at this thing from a slightly different perspective. The answers to those questions were very simple answers. And what IBC needed to do was to just come clean in the first statement and say the material that was found at the airport was the following material. And it was going to do the following things. But because they did not do that, then now we're having all these other questions. And that's where that problem is. Because if you actually look at the material that they were found, they're stickers. And they suspect they're labeling stickers for the kids.
Right.
It's just a simple labeling sticker, which probably may not necessarily have a significant outcome on the election unless those stickers are used
differently. Might, if there's a biometric element to it, it might.
So it was stickers that were found there. But the manner that IBC has conducted itself, there's a huge trust deficit. And that trust deficit is what the problem is.
This is where the issue is.
Yes.
And I think that, Nelson, I would like to hear from you on this. Because, we can say a number of things, and we can talk about the credibility of the DCI, who, in my opinion, right now are doing their job by asking the questions. One of the ways they can do this, which then seems to be a duel between themselves and the IEBC, is by asking the IEBC who these individuals are, what they were doing. That's one of the ways they can carry out this investigation. Like you're asking, how long is it going to take? Well, it's going to take as long as the IEBC takes to answer the question, right? But then the question, one of our viewers asks this question every day. Like clockwork for the last 1 year, Andrew Franklin has asked us, is the IEBC competent to carry out elections in this country? Credible elections in this country after 2017. And if I'm not wrong, he's even asked that question again today. And he has said very clearly, with all due respect, with 14 days and a wake up, IEBC cannot hold credible elections on August 9th, 2022. At the very least, moves are about to either ensure elections go into court or that the presidential polls are postponed. Credible elections? Can they carry out credible elections with all these things that we are seeing having happened over the last 8 weeks?
No. Let me answer your questions as well as the foundation put forth by Manwa here. What is the question? And what is the foundation? The question is IBC competent to carry out this election?
Credibly. And the foundation put forth by Manwa is that the trust deficit manifest on the part of the IBC as illuminated by the conduct of the Venezuelan individuals and the responses by the IBC. Let's start with your question. Who else is empowered to oversight and conduct the election other than IBC? Nobody. So the question of competence cannot arise. The election date is set by the Constitution. The election must be conducted. Is IBC competent? Of course, IBC is competent. We saw the manner in which they were recruited is an institution based upon certain standards elaborated by the Constitution. But the primordial question, which none of you wants to interrogate, who doesn't want the election to go on? You understand? Please listen, Manwa. I require time Go ahead.
to advance my argument. Who doesn't want the election to go on? Is it Dr. William Samoei Ruto or is it Raila Amolo Odinga? The moment you establish the fact that is Raila Amolo Odinga who doesn't want the election to go on, then you realize why this hula baloo, you realize why this drama, and then marry it to what we have already seen. These individuals said they have never been able to win the election because they don't have the system.
How can you
now they have the system? So
how can
tinker with the system, manipulate the process, heighten the tensions, and ask, can we go on with this election?
How can you unequivocally state or even believe that there would be one individual who would want to make sure that the election doesn't go on?
And yet you provide no evidence
how can you do that?
to support what you're saying, HAVI.
How can you be sure of this? It could be something you feel, so it's subjective. It's not something you can prove, so it's objective.
The thing that I'm finding
how can you do that?
Interesting.
Can I answer that question?
Yes.
Yeah, I would like you to say
Absolutely.
how would you know?
That's why I said affirmatively, these individuals have indicated that throughout the electoral cycles, they have not been able to make progress because they don't have the system. They now have the system. Which is this system? This system are institutions like the National Police Service, the DCI, the National Intelligence Service, and they are abusing these systems.
I don't think
that is as clear as daylight. And if you can't see this,
then
we need to increase the resolution of the glasses.
How can you prove that this is actually happening? Citi, go ahead.
This rabbit hole that Nelson HAVI is dragging you into, desist. You see, we've had Nelson HAVI in this studio, and I've admired the clear mind that he has. It's a gift. But it appears a gift that should bestow upon you a sense of humility. HAVI has determined that on this particular occasion today, it should bestow upon him a certain element of arrogance where he dismisses people who he feels don't have his level of education. He attaches that level of education to intelligence. That isn't the measure of intelligence. And now, because of that intelligence,
Elder,
he wants
my
us
level
to
of education is very basic. It's just
he
an
wants to make a
undergraduate degree.
statement. He wants to make a statement, and he wants to make that statement and his own belief stated as a matter of fact. And yet, he doesn't even make an attempt to provide any evidence to what he is saying. So, don't go through that rabbit hole.
It continues to be the question of who is speaking the truth here, and what does it then portend for an election that takes place in this country in the next 14 days.
You know, let's remember, this is not the first time elections have been conducted by IBC in this country. In 2017, did we have any such problem of people coming into the country and not being accounted for? Because if you think about it, ideally, if those gentlemen were contracted by IBC, IBC should have provided evidence to say, look, we invited these individuals, these are the letters of invites, and they've come to do work on our behalf because we've got a contract with their parent company. Now, that has not been provided.
Actually, in the last election, we did have people coming into the country, but they were people who belonged to the opposition. They were Canadians. They were sent back at the airport.
Can I ask just an innocent question?
Yes.
Why hasn't the DCI investigated the failure to open the servers?
No, HAVI, that's a rabbit hole you're taking us down. HAVI, you're taking us down a rabbit hole.
Then take
and you're
me
running
into
away.
a hedgehog hole.
Listen, HAVI, you're running away from the question that presents itself today. And the question is, can IBC conduct, do we have trust and faith, based on what we've seen so far, for IBC to conduct these elections freely and fairly? And I can tell you the things that we have to ask ourselves. There's this matter of this material coming into the country. There's the matter of the ballot papers coming in and some commissioners not knowing. There's a trial run that they did at Bomas of Kenya where they were trying to check this electronic system that also failed. There's the issue of the audit, which for the very first time, they've not released that audit to the public or to anybody. And they're saying, we'll release it. And I remember Marjan saying when they were being interviewed in Bomas that, we are now done with the audit, we'll give it to you. So all these things, and these are things of their own making, of their own doing. It's nobody who has told them to do. It's them themselves. They themselves have done those things.
Permit me to answer Manuel's question. He asked whether we are comfortable with the IBC conducting the election, whether we have trust. I, as Nelson, and I, HAVI, a candidate for election as MP for Westlands. I voted in Westlands. I'm confident that IBC will conduct a free and fair election across the board in the entire country in respect of all the seats. We have prepared ourselves for this election. We have convinced the voters to come and vote for us. We have sold our manifestos. We have ideas. The people have embraced the ideas we have. From the president, Dr. William Samoei Ruto, to the MCA in my ward, Robert Obonyo. We've done this. We are ready for the election. Because we can't be the referee in this game.
Sure.
The referee must be the IBC.
Sure.
Who is it that doesn't want the election to go on?
Coming in from a legal point of view, you, Nelson HAVI, have also been enjoined in cases where you have taken people to court based on a flawed process. You, not once, not twice, and you can tell us the many cases or instances
And
in
I've
which that
won
has happened.
all of them.
So you can understand then that the process matters, and that if you are giving indications today about a process which in any way may be flawed, then there's a problem when it comes to building public trust and confidence. Can you not agree on that?
We are here to provide solutions.
Indeed. And one of the solutions is to tell the truth.
Yes, the problem has already been highlighted. And I've emphasized, let people do their work. The DCI must do his work with dispatch. You understand? He cannot procrastinate over this issue. The time that he has had is enough. You realize?
These fellows came into the country on Thursday.
No, Ndu. Let's not condone this nonsense on the part of the DCI. If this issue is of so much importance to the criminal justice system, it will have been resolved by now. The mere fact that it persists longer than enough, gives me the conviction that it's a triviality. It's a sideshow. It's an afterthought.
But
it's not an issue at all.
Nelson, yesterday, did the DCI not issue a 25-page report on this very saga that we are discussing?
An incoherent report.
There we go again.
Okay.
There we go again. If the DCI issues a report that other people in this country read and find coherent, Nelson HAVI finds it incoherent. What was incoherent about it, Nelson?
The DCI must stop shenanigans. The DCI does not oversight. The DCI does not conduct a general election. The election must be conducted by the IBC. And the DCI must tell us now whose brief he's holding. We know whose brief he's been holding for the last few years.
Nelson, you premised your initial argument or your position on the fact that the DCI then is meant to cover matters countrywide, across board, and the IEBC falls under that. They fall under that.
Everybody and anybody in this country
falls under that. They have a right. They have a mandate to ask questions.
Can I tell you how
and
ridiculous the DCI can be? Sometime, I think 1.5 years ago, I was accused of having assaulted somebody at Gitanga Road. Now, the offense is alleged to have taken place in Gitanga Road. They came and seized me from my office, detained me at the DCI offices, and then wanted to go and search my office in my absence. How stupid can somebody be? What evidence about the assault could there have been in my office? You see, when I talk about the DCI and their inability to perform any criminal investigation, I know what I'm talking about.
So that's coming from a personal.
I understand.
That's coming from a personal issue that you had, and then they're now using.
It's just an example. It's just an example.
Are you extrapolating? Are you extrapolating in this matter?
I've acted for clients. I've appeared before the DCI. I've sat with the DCI in the NCAJ. You understand? The level of their incompetence is preposterous.
HAVI. Yet every day, you wake up in the morning in this country and you're safe. And you go home and you're safe and your children are safe. And we still say that DCI is very incompetent. But having the thing
the DCI supervise so many extrajudicial killings in this country. I do not rely upon them for my safety. That one I can tell you without any fear.
The thing you must stop
is God who protects me.
Is to speak with both sides of your mouth.
Not the DCI.
Please.
Let's cut that shit.
Because on the one side, you want to be the good lawyer. And on the other side, you want to be the politician. And I think today you are struggling to balance which of those two.
You are struggling to understand
which of those two you need to bring to the table today.
Actually, it's not him who's struggling to understand. It's me who's struggling to understand you, HAVI. Because
I know you understand me pretty well, but you need to progress the discussion. That's why you must ask these questions.
I am glad that you have at least the humility to admit what you're trying to do. And now you're even clever in that you're trying to place it on my shoulders, that it is I who is actually doing it. Touché, as they say. Now, Nelson.
Let's have a cup of water. We drink it as friends.
Yes.
And spice it with our friendship.
Yes. Nelson.
Yes, Elder.
All of us who are on this table do not have the purview, the experience, the knowledge to determine in detail how effective or how efficient or how well the DC actually do their job. The best we can do is look at the outcomes and judge the preceding activities or from that. But beyond that, same with IEBC. That is why we haven't uttered one syllable to indicate the IEBC is incompetent. All we've said is we have questions that they don't seem to answer. They've been asked a simple explanation. And we are saying there's a backlog of these things, questions that have been asked of the IEBC, things that are their purview. And so long as the answers are incomplete or there is silence, then people then are allowed to determine what they see fit. Now, that is what brings about this untenable situation of the tension that you mentioned, because people want to know and they don't know. If the DCI were investigating and they haven't told us, same yardstick, we need to know. Tell us, what have you found out and where is the evidence? It's not a different yardstick, it's the same yardstick. And why the question arises on matters of the IEBC with such fervor is because, my friend,
we've been here before.
Yes, and they are the only institution in this country who have the mandate to do what they're supposed to be doing.
You can't.
We don't have another option. It's them.
You cannot
Agreed.
go report the
Agreed.
IEBC to somebody else over election processes. Who are you going to go and tell that there's a problem here? It is them. It is them. And so that's what I'm saying. The same measure, HAVI, that is being applied to the DCI in terms of how they must finish with the investigation and do it quickly is the same measure that must be applied to the IEBC as well. Is there information that you have that you should make public? Absolutely. Make it public. Let people know what is going on, because what you do is that you foment the suspicion when you don't tell people what is happening. If it looks as though there's something to hide, the possibility of there being something to hide then is probably high.
And that is the reason why I, Nelson, and I, HAVI, as a lawyer, as a Kenyan, will not participate in any lynch mob. You understand?
On the IEBC.
However aggravated the offense is, listen, I will defend anybody, including Lucifer himself, because he is entitled to the best representation.
Including the DCI?
Listen, I've defended so many officers at the DCI. I've defended the DCI director. You understand? What I'm asking here is objectivity. We ask the germane question. And in doing so, we look at the history of these individuals. We look at the history of these institutions. The DCI has a history of dramatic investigations. One, some, many, that do not lead to anything. But that's said and done. I've said this. How long do they require to conduct these investigations? Why can't they finish this exercise speedily so that we get back to the preparatory process towards the conduct of an election?
The report they gave
and they cannot conduct the election.
Nelson, the report they gave yesterday, you've dismissed as incoherent, and yet they have issued a report on this very same thing. You know,
why hasn't the DPP taken up that report and arraigned people in court if at all there was an offense? Because there's no offense.
Nelson, how on earth would I know that?
That's what I'm telling you. Because you don't know, permit me to tell you. If there was an offense, the DPP will have taken up the matter and people will have been charged in court. There is no offense.
The matter was yesterday, it was Sunday. Today is Monday.
It's still slim pickings. We're just before 8 o'clock this morning. You never know what could happen by 9. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But I mean, look, if you somehow smell something, then perhaps there could be a rat lurking in the corner. And this is the thing that Kenyans want to make sure that there is no rat in the corner. We're coming around to 8 o'clock, top of the hour. Nelson, always a pleasure to have you in the studio. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, and we'd like you to come back again soon. Look into these matters.
Thank you.
Once.
I'll be delighted to be here.
Indeed. Once again, even as we have these heated conversations, important to remember, election Bilanoma, you will be voting come the 9th of August. And remember that you'll be voting amongst people that you love, people that you live with, people that you trade with, people that your children go to school with. Very important to realize and understand that we must have elections that are girded and guided in peace. Election Bilanoma. It's want to hear from you, even as we go into the top of the hour, and also your last words on this, hoping to see what will be coming out in the next few days.
What will be coming out in the next few days is this. The people of Kenya must see the need for them to change the government that we have right now for the better, social, economic development. And I take this opportunity to encourage them, to give them the assurance that there will be a free and fair election. Institutions will do their work. But more importantly, the people of Kenya must do their work. They must come out in large numbers on the 9th of August and elect leaders who have the ability, the wherewithal, the commitment to change. Those leaders can only be found in UDA and Kenya Kwanza, starting from Dr. William Samoei Ruto for president, and at the bottom here, Nelson HAVI for MP Westlands. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you, Nelson. Thanks for keeping it here. Conversations continue. For now, it's 8 o'clock.